means Brexit.
To pretend that it's going to be plain sailing is such knuckle-headed lunacy.
Happy days are here.
They have said one thing one day, another thing the next day.
What did the politicians really think during the year that changed British politics?
Just punch him.
Brexit means Brexit. Available now on BBC iPlayer.
At 6 o'clock, the news now on BBC One with George Alagaya.
Tonight at 6, at last the deal is done. Theresa May gets backing for her minority government. The DUP will support the Tories on crucial votes. In return, they get an extra £1 billion for Northern Ireland.
Today we have reached an outcome that is good for the United Kingdom, good for Northern Ireland, and allows our nation to move forward to tackle the challenges ahead.
We'll hear from critics who accuse the government of bribing the DUP. Also tonight, the Grenfell Tower aftermath. Every high-rise that's been checked has failed its fire safety test. 75 and counting. 3 nights after they evacuated their high-rise flats, residents are forced to move again, and they're angry.
We have been evacuated, we are homeless, we are on the streets. This is my anger towards those who are responsible.
They're home from home. Theresa May's assurance for over 3 million EU nationals in Britain.
No EU citizen currently in the UK lawfully will be asked to leave at the point the UK leaves the EU. We want you to stay.
The deaths of 5 men who drowned at Camber Sands. The inquest hears of the hidden dangers of the beach.
On BBC London, claims the company responsible for refurbishing this high-rise in Camden were warned about safety concerns 5 years ago. And a minute's silence to remember those affected by the Finsbury Park terror attack.
Good evening and welcome to the BBC's News at 6. Finally, after more than 2 weeks of talking, Theresa May has a deal with the Democratic Unionist Party that will allow her to govern, even though she did not win an outright majority at the election. But the deal comes with a cost. In return for their support in Parliament, the DUP has extracted an extra £1 billion of public spending in Northern Ireland. The deal has been heavily criticised, especially in Wales and Scotland, with both governments arguing they should also receive extra cash. This report from our political editor Laura Koonsberg contains flash photography.
18 days since the election, nearly 3 weeks of waiting. A political lifetime for the Prime Minister.
Deal or no deal, Mrs Foster?
But the DUP, power on their side, have been taking their time. Not just friends, but this a snap of a political family now.
The value of the union.
A deal agreed at the cabinet table, no less.
We also share the desire to ensure that there is a strong government able to put through a programme.
A strong government? Well, less wobbly perhaps. The Northern Irish Party promising their votes in Parliament to prop up Theresa May. That gives her just a majority. This is what they get in return.
Following our discussions, the Conservative Party has recognised the case for higher funding in Northern Ireland, given our unique history and indeed circumstances over recent decades. Today we have reached an outcome that is good for the United Kingdom.
The Tories have promised the DUP an extra £1 billion of taxpayers' cash for Northern Ireland over the next 2 years to spend on infrastructure, health or education projects. And the Tories have had to drop their idea of means testing winter fuel payments for the elderly and making changes to pensions. But in return, the 10 DUP MPs will back the Tories on big votes, like the Queen's speech or the budget.
So I'm used to signing my life away.
Well, I have to say.
The election threw the Tory majority away. As you see on her face, Theresa May would never have chosen this scenario. But they've signed on the dotted line, so they have something to count on, knowing full well other parts of the UK will be angry. And how?
This is cash for votes. It's a bung at the end of the day. In 2 years' time, the DUP will come back and ask for even more money. What's happened here is that the taxpayers of England, Wales and Scotland will continue to suffer austerity and Northern Ireland won't.
This is not Northern Irish control of Parliament. It's about being able to make Westminster work at all. Ministers knew this criticism would come. Are they prepared?
I'm not against investment in Northern Ireland. I welcome investment in infrastructure and public services, but there ought to be fairness. If there's investment coming to Northern Ireland, Scotland should be getting its fair share.
You're paying £100 million to the DUP for every single one of their votes. You've bought them off, haven't you?
People in all parts of the country are benefiting from the fact that we have a strong enough economy that we can afford to spend more money on health. We've pledged £8 billion on health around the country.
If you're cancelling austerity in Northern Ireland, you're not cancelling it anywhere else. And people in Scotland, Wales, the north of England, haven't they got every right to feel quite cross about this?
Well, people in Scotland, Wales and different parts of England are getting money, but this is separate from that. This is the Northern Ireland Block Grant, which, as I say, has already existed. So this is not unprecedented.
The extra cash might help resurrect joint rule in Northern Ireland, but it just wouldn't have happened if they hadn't agreed to back Theresa May. This small group might not be familiar faces yet, but they're now part of the power behind a shaky throne.
Now, in a moment, we can speak to Laura in Westminster. But first, let's go to Belfast and our correspondent Chris Page to talk to him about the implications of the deal for Northern Ireland, especially as negotiations are underway to re-establish the executive at Stormont. So, Chris, how has this gone down with the other parties in Northern Ireland?
Well, the DUP leader, Arlene Foster, went from one negotiation to another. She came straight back from Downing Street and then went into talks here at Stormont with the other parties. They're trying to strike a deal to restore devolved government here. There's been no power-sharing executive at Stormont since January. And things here for the negotiators were really on hold until people saw what was in the deal between the DUP and the Tories in London. And as so often in Northern Ireland, you really heard two ways of looking at it. On the one hand, an extra £400 million for infrastructure here, £250 million for health, £50 million for education. What politician wouldn't want to go back into government, get their hands on that cash and spend it? On the other hand, could the fact that the DUP and the Tories are now working so closely together at Westminster bring a sense of unease for nationalists? Could nationalists think that, for example, the DUP could basically get favours and be put at an unfair advantage? So plenty of talking still to be done here. The deadline's Thursday. Sinn Féin not wildly enthusiastic about the deal, but not pouring cold water on it either.
All right, Chris, thank you very much. And as I was saying, we can talk to Laura now in Westminster. Laura, so Theresa May has got her deal, but how much stronger is she really politically?
Well, George, it's like she's been flying around in a kind of limbo, experiencing lots of turbulence since the election results that were so disappointing for the Tories. She has now come into land, if you like, but she's still landed on very, very shaky ground. There's concern inside the Conservative Party about the image of this deal being tied to the DUP in this kind of way. There's also real anger from some of the other parties, and in Cardiff, Edinburgh, and probably in the north of England too. If the DUP has managed to get this extra cash for Northern Ireland, what about the rest of the country? But I think it comes down to the brute force of the numbers. Without this deal, Theresa May did not have a majority in the House of Commons. Without this deal, therefore, there was absolutely no guarantee that she'd be able to get anything done. And without this deal, she was very vulnerable to any kind of confidence vote and simply not being able to get her Queen's speech through the Commons later this week. So what this does is give her a layer of political protection. But does this mean she's suddenly massively reinforced and strengthened? Not tonight.
Laura, thank you. Now, in the last hour, the government has announced that 75 high-rise residential buildings in 26 council areas around the country have failed fire tests. That amounts to every single building that's been checked so far. Local Government Secretary Sajid Javid says that 1,000 fire doors were missing from the Camden Tower blocks that have been evacuated. Meanwhile, the company which makes the cladding that's thought to have been used on Grenfell Tower has withdrawn the product. Our Home Affairs correspondent Tom Simons has the latest.
Aluminium cladding for smarter and cosier council flats. Well, that was the promise. Around the country, this was Billingham on Teesside, councils have been reduced to this, taking it off and sending it for testing, leaving residents concerned and confused.
they're not very happy about it, are they? They feel that it should have been put right in the first place.
When the shiny stuff is gone, this is what's left behind, along with a cladding crisis as councils try to understand if their residents are at risk. Many are having to introduce additional fire inspections under government guidance sent out last week, not least for reassurance.
It's frightening, it really frightened you. Well, it made you feel sick, really, just to think how it could happen like that.
But this is the legacy of the housing catastrophe 2 weeks ago. The tests are happening in secret so far at this research centre. Samples from 75 towers have been sent.
The combustibility test has 3 categories rated 1 to 3, and it is judged that cladding material in category 2 or 3 does not meet the requirements for limited combustibility in building regulations. I can also confirm to the House that so far, on that basis, all samples of cladding tested have failed.
But as far as anyone currently knows, this was cladding passed as safe by building inspectors. The building regulations are complex, but they start from a basic principle. The external walls of the building shall adequately resist the spread of fire. The question is how to meet that requirement. Well, there's another document, something called Approved Document B, which in a section which doesn't even mention cladding, says materials used should be of limited combustibility, meaning they burn slowly. But even that's not straightforward, because designers can instead turn to 2 more documents, these 2, which set out other ways components such as fire barriers can be added to cladding which does burn to reduce a fire, including using a desktop study to prove it's safe.
It may well be the case that the regulations and the related guidance need to be updated to take account of changing technology in the building industry. But secondly, we're concerned that the current regulations and guidance are not being applied and are not being enforced strictly enough.
Indeed, the Communities Secretary told the Commons today 1,000 fire doors were missing from the towers evacuated in Camden following safety concerns. The inquests into 4 more of the victims open today. A coroner will consider what contributed to their deaths, as will the police. The planned public inquiry will look at possible, much wider failings in public safety. Because the pain of the Grenfell tragedy goes deep. The family of 52-year-old Khadija Khaloofi held a funeral blessing for her today. She is just one among at least 79 victims. Tom Simons, BBC News.
3 days after hundreds of residents from 4 tower blocks in Camden in North London were asked to evacuate their homes, there's confusion about how and where they will be rehoused. Sophie Hutchinson has been speaking to some of them.
People continued packing up their flats today and moving out of the tower blocks on the Chalcot estate in North London. Some families have been found temporary accommodation, but others say they feel abandoned by the council with nowhere to go.
No response.
This resident has spent the past 2 nights in a hotel with his wife and 4 children, but they can't stay there tonight.
Yesterday I called the council that my stay in the hotel is running out tomorrow. Find us, a solution. What are you going to do? And all I hear, oh, we're looking at your case, we will find you something, hopefully. Oh, what the hope is this? I don't understand what the hope is this.
This is the hotel room the family of 6 slept in last night, filmed by their daughter. Today, staff told them to leave. Fahim is hoping he may have found a flat for tonight, but when we left him, it still wasn't confirmed.
Now we feel as victims. We are victims because we have been evacuated. We are homeless. We are on the streets. This is my anger towards those who are responsible.
The Swiss Cottage Leisure Centre is where those families with nowhere to go have been sleeping. One of the residents captured the conditions inside on his mobile phone. People from 4 of the 5 tower blocks on the Chalcot estate have been told to leave because of safety fears over gas pipes, fire doors and cladding.
Here it is, just up there.
Oh, those are the two panels that they've taken away?
Yes.
Saeed Mir has refused to leave the flat where he lives with his wife and disabled mother because he says he's not been offered a realistic alternative.
Offering us a one-bedroom disabled access facility about 3 miles away, Northwest 10. But one bedroom with 2 beds, so it means me and my partner, my wife, sharing a room with my mum for 1 month, and no.
Safety checks were underway at the blocks today. The numbers refusing to leave have increased, and Camden Council is appealing for cooperation. Sophie Hutchinson, BBC News.
And the time is very nearly 6:15. Our top story this evening. The deal with the DUP is done. Theresa May gets backing for her minority government. And still to come, how many hours sleep do you get a night, and what effect does it have on you?
Later on BBC London, 14 officers injured, 5 people arrested. Anger at the police following the death of a young father in Forest Gate. And a Londoner who saw this on a beach in Mallorca describes a brief moment of panic among holidaymakers.
Theresa May has reassured the more than 3 million EU nationals living in Britain that they will not be forced to leave the country after Brexit. The Prime Minister said EU citizens legally in the UK would have what she called settled status, enjoying all the rights of UK citizens except the right to vote in general elections. But as Vicky Young reports, the offer depends on British citizens living in the EU being given the same status.
Theresa May says she's giving reassurance and certainty.
Is your offer to EU nationals good enough, Prime Minister?
Allaying their anxieties is a priority, according to the Prime Minister, and she told MPs she had a serious and fair offer to make.
Under these plans, no EU citizen currently in the UK lawfully will be asked to leave at the point the UK leaves the EU. We want you to stay.
So EU citizens will be able to apply for something called settled status. That's the right to live in the UK permanently, accessing public services and other benefits. Applicants will have to have lived in Britain for at least 5 continuous years and will need to have come here before a certain cut-off date, which is yet to be agreed. In Brussels last week, Mrs May said that could be as early as March this year, when she triggered the formal Brexit negotiations. But EU leaders say the deadline should be the date the UK leaves, expected in 2019. The Labour leader said all this should have been sorted out a year ago.
The Prime Minister has dragged the issue of citizens and families deep into the complex and delicate negotiations of our future trade relations with the European Union, which she herself has been willing to say may result in failure. This isn't a generous offer. This is confirmation the government is prepared to use people as bargaining chips.
And another row is brewing over who sorts out any legal dispute about these citizens' rights.
Would my right honourable friend give due assurance that any pressure to allow the European Court of Justice any role in immigration or future ILR status of EU citizens within this country will be flatly opposed?
I believe that in terms of assuring the rights of EU citizens living here in the United Kingdom, we believe that should be done through our courts and not through the European Court of Justice.
Theresa May is promising a smooth and streamlined process to make it as easy as possible for EU citizens to secure their rights after Brexit. The Home Office will have to set up a whole new system, potentially dealing with millions of applications. It's a huge challenge, and officials hope it will be up and running by next year. But before that, there will be tough talks. The EU's Brexit negotiator has already called for more ambition, clarity and guarantees from the UK. Vicky Young, BBC News, Westminster.
So how have Theresa May's words gone down with EU nationals living here and with Brits living in the EU? Our correspondent Jeremy Cook has been finding out.
In a quiet corner of London, German voices raised in song. Many of the singers have been here for decades, and the government's announcement today is meant to offer them reassurance.
It could just change any time, that's my feeling. And it's just so much insecurity.
What's slightly uncomfortable, certainly, is the fact that we are a bargaining chip. I'm still
the eternal optimist, and I hope that ultimately politicians will put people first.
The choirmaster is Barbara Hoffling, a professional singer, shaken by the Brexit vote and its consequences.
I just don't see why suddenly, because of issues of the NHS, we want money for the NHS, or issues of we don't like foreigners, suddenly we're treated like second-class citizens. It just doesn't make sense to me.
Does it feel like that to you?
Oh, very much so.
What Theresa May and David Davis would say is the evidence of today will be that they want you to stay, that you will be given settled citizen status.
It's not how it feels. Not at all.
I've got peace like a river.
Over in Berlin, it's the Brits in full voice.
I've got peace.
Most here are confident that they can stay after the UK leaves the EU.
As someone who kind of personifies free movement, having come here 20 years ago and reaped all of the benefits, I'm very concerned that a whole generation and generations after that are going to miss out.
At the moment, I don't have to choose between British and German, and I think that would have been very hard, but since the Brexit vote and what you hear about that's happening in the UK at the moment, actually it would make it easier for me to become a German and give up my British citizenship.
The choirmaster here is Andrew Sims, who moved to Berlin in 1988.
Maybe when people see the real costs of Brexit, of leaving what I believe is the greatest peace project in the history of humanity, which has given us peace in Europe for the last 70 years, I hope that people will reflect.
Theresa May is determined to deliver on the Brexit vote and also to reassure those most directly impacted. It's proving a difficult balance to strike. Jeremy Cook, BBC News.
A minute's silence has been observed around the UK in memory of the victims of the Finsbury Park mosque attack in London last week. People gathered in public places and government buildings at midday to remember those affected. One man died and 9 others were injured when a van was driven into a crowd of Muslim worshippers in Finsbury Park. A 47-year-old man has been charged with terrorism-related murder and attempted murder. An inquest has heard how 5 friends who drowned during a day trip to Camber Sands in East Sussex last year were all fit and competent swimmers. The men, who were aged between 18 and 27, lived in the London area and were of Sri Lankan origin. The lawyer acting for the victims' families described Camber Sands as having hidden dangers. Duncan Kennedy reports.
This was Camber Sands this afternoon, its stunning beach drawing thousands of people. No sign of what one lawyer today called its hidden dangers. But last summer, this was the same beach shortly after 5 men drowned here, all friends on a day trip. Today, the men's families came to their inquest and spoke of what their loss means.
We're just hoping to learn that at least they'll be more secure and safer, lifeguards, and the beach is more protected. That's our only thoughts. This is what we want.
Nithasan Ravi was one of the 5 men to drown. The others were Kobi Sathyanathan, his brother Kanujan, Inthushan Sriskantharasa and Guru Sritharvaraja. The inquest heard they were all fit and all of them could swim. But 1 month earlier, Mohit Dupar and Gustavo Silva de Cruz also drowned on the same beach. The fact that 7 men drowned here in the space of 1 month has made this double inquest not just about personal tragedy, but also about beach safety. The coroner in this case said today that he wanted to make sure that it never happened again. At the time of both incidents, there were no permanent lifeguards on the beach. This summer, there are. The families of the men who died say they want lessons learned, so no one else has to suffer this appalling tragedy. Duncan Kennedy, BBC News, on Camber Sands.
Now, are you getting enough sleep? Scientists in Canada are launching what's set to become the world's largest study into the effects of sleep deprivation on the brain. They want hundreds of thousands of people worldwide to do tests online to see how much the amount of sleep we get affects our ability to function. Here's our medical correspondent, Fergus Walsh.
We spend nearly a third of our lives asleep. It's vital for our physical and mental health. But we're getting less sleep than ever.
His visual cortex, his eyes are open, but there's actually...
British neuroscientist Adrian Owen, based in Ontario, believes this may be having a serious effect on our brain power.
Every day we make hundreds of decisions and we remember hundreds of things. I mean, we make difficult decisions like, should I buy a house and should I get married? But we also have to remember many, many simple things like where I parked the car or what I intended to buy on the way home from work. And all of these things can be affected by lack of sleep. You're going to sleep for 4 hours and then I am going to come and personally wake all of you up.
I joined volunteers at Western University, Ontario, trying out his online tests, designed to assess reasoning, memory and decision-making. To demonstrate how tiredness may affect those, we stayed up until 4 a.m. and then had just 4 hours sleep. But all too soon...
Good morning, Fergus. Time to get up.
We were about to repeat the brain tests we'd done the previous night.
How are you feeling?
So I'm feeling like I haven't had enough sleep.
Most of our scores went down compared to the night before.
How did you do this morning?
Worst.
This was the worst you ever did?
Ever, yes. Oh, kisses for your sister. That's really nice. That's nice.
But Sylvie, whose daughters wake her several times a night, improved her score.
Maybe I've just gotten used to functioning on very little sleep. I have to be on as soon as my kids wake up.
As for me...
I finished, and I've done quite badly.
I also did the tests while having my brain scanned. After a normal night's sleep, my brain was functioning well. The bright orange blobs are areas of increased activity. And this is the scan done after 4 hours sleep. There's not much going on.
It's pretty clear that there's much less activity in these areas of the brain that we know are crucial for things like decision-making and problem-solving and memory.
So our 24-hour culture could be having a serious impact on society. This study should reveal how much sleep we need for our brains to be at their best. Fergus Walsh, BBC News, Ontario, Canada.
Time for the weather now with Thomas Schaffenlacker. Hello.
Hello, George. In short, rain on the way, and there's actually a fair bit of it on the way, particularly for northwestern areas over the next 24 hours. And this week, I think all of us will have at least a bit of rain. Beautiful picture still coming in today. This one's from Scarborough. Some beautiful seaside huts there. But the weather is changing very quickly across many western areas. The clouds are being pushed in by the jet stream, and that means rain. So across the rest of the country through this evening, actually not so bad. We've still got some fine, bright, even sunny weather across many eastern and central parts of the country, but out west the clouds are increasing. It's already starting to rain across parts of Northern Ireland as I speak. In Scotland, just a couple of showers, but for most of us here, the early evening is looking dry. And it is going to be soggy tonight. In fact, raining pretty hard, I think, across parts of Northern Ireland through the course of the night. Then eventually that rain will be moving into southwestern Scotland, the Lake District, into parts of northern Wales as well. The weather in the south will be dry though, but warm, 15-16 degrees Celsius. And then tomorrow, low pressure is right over us. In fact, there are 3 lows circling us as we go through the course of the day. The wettest of the weather will be across the north. In the south, what we might find is some thunderstorms developing. So, for example, anywhere from, say, central southern England into London and East Anglia could be some cracks of thunder. And wherever you are tomorrow, just be prepared for some rain. And, of course, cool. And then Tuesday night into Wednesday, again, those lows are still with us. And this is a very sort of unpleasant picture, very different to what we had last week. Look at those temperatures, only 13 degrees there in Newcastle, so not feeling summery at all.
Oh dear. Thomas, thank you. And that's it. Now on BBC One, we can join the BBC's news teams where you are. Goodbye.
Tonight on BBC London News, claims from a whistleblower about Rydon, the company which refurbished Grenfell Tower and this evacuated block in Camden. He says the firm ignored his safety warnings 5 years ago.
I'm extremely worried for the residents' safety.
We pointed this out during the refurbishment works, but it seemed to fall on deaf ears.
We'll hear from the London MP who chairs the Commons Committee on Fire Safety, which is meeting tonight. Also ahead. A minute's silence is held to remember those affected by the terror attack near Finsbury Park Mosque a week ago. Plus, thanking those who helped get it airborne. Where with the Essex Air Ambulance as it unveils its latest helicopter. And appealing to your senses, the new exhibition at Somerset House showcasing the century's perfume pioneers. Hello, I'm Riz Latif. Welcome to the programme this Monday evening. We start tonight with claims that Rydon, the company responsible for carrying out refurbishments to Grenfell Tower, ignored fire safety warnings during the refurbishment of another high-rise in Camden. Hundreds of residents were evacuated from their homes on the Chalcots estate on Friday after London Fire Brigade said they couldn't guarantee the safety of those living there. But BBC London has heard from a contractor who claims he warned Rydon about his fears over one of the blocks, Taplow House, 5 years ago. But he says those concerns fell on deaf ears. Alex Bushell reports.
Tonight, thousands of residents are still out of their home, angry, displaced and wanting answers. They were evacuated with little warning on Friday night from 4 tower blocks here on the Chalcots estate. And now BBC London can reveal how we were the first to highlight safety concerns to the council, which led to these dramatic scenes.
There are one of 2 gas risers on this floor landing. This was one of the risers, and my concerns are that if there is a fire in this communal area, and the fire breaches this pipe, which is basically a PVC gas pipe behind this small bit of what even feels like a bit of timber cladding, this resident would not be able to escape.
Meet Sebastian Stevenson of Diligent Developments. I met him a week ago when we filmed here inside Taplow House.
If there's a fire in that floor, it will breach that fire door and engulf the communal exit.
We filmed as he listed all his concerns inside the tower block, and there were a few.
A fire door should actually look like this, compositely set up with a solid core panel door, with an intermission strip. Maybe there's a door closer on the internal side of this door.
And then a fire, this strip heats up and seals the door.
And in a fire, this strip heats up and seals the door and prevents smoke inhalation into the actual space. Whereas this glass is just simple George wire safety glass and would crack under the slightest application of any heat.
He first saw this building when his company came in to refurbish the 17th floor after a fire inside one of the flats.
So clearly you can see here the images of the fire-damaged property.
That was in 2012. He says he raised these concerns with Rydon, the company responsible for maintenance.
It's 5 years later, there's no excuse for these safety violations to still be intrinsic into these buildings.
Well, we raised his concerns on Tuesday of last week with the council. On Friday, 3 days later, a dramatic development. Taplow House and 3 other towers nearby were evacuated precisely because of fears over the cladding and the interior fire safeguards. What's more, Taplow House has had a fire inspection, which it passed as recently as the spring of last year. So what went wrong, and were Camden Council told? Well, in a statement, the company Rydon have said they have no record whatsoever of any concerns or warnings being raised by Diligent Developments, and that the particular areas of concern, whether that's the fire alarms or the gas risers, well, the responsibility for them lies instead with Camden Council. The statement goes on to say that Rydon prides itself on the quality of all works that they carry out, that they've been working with local authorities for more than 40 years, and that safety is integral to everything they do. As for Camden Council, they said tonight they've been on the front foot, as they put it, to ensure their tower blocks meet the required safety standards. And they will be asking serious questions about the management of internal fire safety issues. Alex Bushell, BBC London News.
Reporter Jim Weeble is in Camden for us tonight, where hundreds of residents there are spending a 4th night away from their homes, Jim.
That's right, Riz. Here on the Chalcots estate, the urgent fire safety improvement works are ongoing. We do know, though, that 103 flats here are still occupied. Residents refusing to leave. The council are very clear that they really want them to go because they fear that it could hold up the work. We also heard earlier today from the Community Secretary, Sajid Javid, who explained to us and gave us a much better picture as to why this drastic action was taken and what inspectors faced here when they came here a couple of days ago.
When the commissioners went into those tower blocks in Camden, in their own words, they found multiple fire safety inspection failures. Failures which frankly should not have happened in tower blocks of any type, certainly those tower blocks in Camden. For example, there were problems with gas pipe insulation, there were stairways that were not accessible, there were breaches of internal walls, and most astonishingly, there were literally hundreds of fire doors missing. The estimate by Camden Council itself is that they need at least 1,000 fire doors because they were missing from those 5 blocks.
Jim, what's the picture at tower blocks elsewhere in the capital?
Well, there are now 8 boroughs who sent off cladding and have been told that it's failed. The latest one who we learnt about today is Hackney, Housing Association block on the Woodbury Downs estate. But there are others, of course: Camden, Hounslow, Islington, Brent, Barnet, Wandsworth, Lambeth. All of these boroughs have had tower blocks which have had cladding failing the fire safety test. None of these others, though, have had residents evacuated. The concerns here in Camden seem very particular to these sets of blocks, but it's worth noting, though, that all of the other blocks in question have subsequently had fire safety assessments done by the London Fire Brigade. They have told residents that they are safe as long as certain precautions are taken, notably 24-hour patrols.
OK, Jim, in Camden, thanks very much. Well, later tonight, a debate is being held in the Commons to discuss the Grenfell Tower fire and the subsequent response. It was called by the MP for Poplar and Limehouse, Jim Fitzpatrick, who chairs the Commons Group on Fire Safety, and I'm pleased to say he joins us now from Westminster. Good evening to you. Let's just pick up on Camden, because we heard in the Commons there that it's not just a cladding issue, it's gas pipes, blocked access routes. And as Sajid Javid said, there are astonishingly 1,000 fire doors lacking. How alarmed are you by what appears to be systematic failings?
Well, this is very scary. It was quite clear that Camden's reaction to evacuate residents was based on some safety advice. It would always be difficult to criticise a local authority for erring on the side of safety, but the information which has emerged this evening about the loss of fire doors within those blocks demonstrates that their judgment was absolutely right, and that's why Camden is taking its decision, whereas other local authorities who are not facing the multiple fire protection failures that they are have taken a different decision.
And do you accept that these failings do go back over a number of years, including when you were Fire Minister? Were you happy with regulations at the time?
Well, we changed the regulations in 2006. We issued a revised issue of the building regulations, approved document B, which is the guidance for architects and for construction companies. We've been lobbying as an all-party group since 2013 after the Lakanal House Coroner's Inquiry recommended a review of approved document B. The Secretary of State this afternoon announced the creation of an independent expert advisory panel to look at all fire safety matters, and that's welcome. We would say that this work ought to have been done since 2013. The fact that it's going to be done urgently now is good news, but they need to get on with it, and we certainly don't need to wait for the outcome of a public inquiry, because fire regulations can be updated in tandem with that public inquiry, which could take some time.
How many tower blocks in London do you think could end up having combustible cladding on them? We know that it's 14 so far in 7 London authorities.
I'm sorry, I haven't got an estimate as to how many. Clearly, there are a significant number. There are 600 across the country. You take London's density, population, you can probably arrive at an estimate. The bottom line is that the testing has started. Local authorities are carrying out inspections. The fire brigade are advising. The most important thing is to protect people until such times as proper precautions and proper safety measures are in place. And because we don't want a repeat of Grenfell Tower, are, and we need to make sure that everything that possibly can be done in the interim ought to be done and is being done.
And just very briefly, do you think the people of Grenfell Tower were murdered by political decisions, as the Shadow Chancellor has said?
My colleague David Lammy has said that the Corporate Manslaughter Act of 2005 may be an appropriate vehicle. It will be for the public inquiry to make a judgment as to how the fire started and why there was such a rapid spread, how there was a catastrophic failure of all the precautions within the building and who was responsible. And the public inquiry will make recommendations to the prosecutorial authorities and to government as to the appropriate way forward.
Jim Fitzpatrick, many thanks for your time this evening. Thank you. The capital has observed a minute's silence to remember those affected by the terrorist attack in Finsbury Park a week ago, the third in London in as many months. A father of 6 died and 11 others were injured as a van drove into Muslim worshippers. Our religious affairs correspondent Martin Bashir reports.
The floral tribute in Finsbury Park, a reminder of events just a week ago, the fourth terrorist attack in just 3 months. And at midday, a minute's silence. The nation invited to pause and remember those impacted by this latest attack. And then gathered outside Islington Town Hall, civic leaders, the local mayor and members of staff, many working and living locally, all gathered to show solidarity with the Muslim community in this multi-ethnic part of North London. A gesture greatly appreciated by the chair of Finsbury Park Mosque.
We know that we are here in Islington, a diverse community. We live in harmony for a long time. We never had problems among them. Those people who try to divide us, they failed, and we proved it. We proved it in the last few days, actually. And this is why I'm really glad that Islington and the country come to get together to make sure that these people are fair.
With the end of Ramadan at the weekend, there's normally a sense of joyous celebration amongst Muslims. But following the attack last Monday, joy has been replaced by sober remembrance. Martin Bashir, BBC London News.
14 police officers have been injured and 5 people arrested in a protest over the death of a young father in East London. Edson Frederico da Costa died a week after being stopped in a car by the Metropolitan Police. His family said they had arranged a peaceful march, but others had thrown bricks and lit fires. Here's our Home Affairs correspondent, Nick Beake.
Protesters and police face to face. This was the standoff outside Forest Gate police station. Demonstrators said the Met had questions to answer. A local man had died after being stopped by officers.
They need to tell us what happened. What happened on that day? How did he start fighting for his life? What must have happened? That's all we need to know from the police. Simple.
25-year-old Edson Frederico da Costa died last Wednesday. The police watchdog said it believed the Met used CS gas and force, but not severe force. But campaigners claimed he received significant injuries and anger spilled into disorder at this latest protest.
You probably imagine in a war zone or something. You wouldn't imagine happening in East London.
Last night's trouble happened on Ahmed Noor's doorstep. He took this video, bins burning in the street where many families were celebrating the Muslim festival of Eid.
It was terrifying. I haven't seen nothing like this in 50 years. It was, you know, luckily they didn't smash the cars and they didn't throw anything towards the houses. They just vented their frustration, I suppose.
So what's the background to this story? Well, on Thursday, June the 15th, Met police officers stop a car in Newham. Mr da Costa becomes unwell, according to the police watchdog, the IPCC. He's taken to hospital in a critical condition. The following Wednesday, he dies in hospital. The next day, as campaigners claim he's been brutally beaten, the IPCC say a post-mortem examination found he had no broken neck, no spinal injuries or bleeding to the brain. Still, there is widespread distrust. Despite the flames and the obvious fury, the protest at this police station last night was contained and didn't spread particularly far. But the level of anger over the death of a young black man after contact with the Metropolitan Police has worrying echoes of another case 6 years ago. The shooting of Mark Duggan by armed police sparked the 2011 riots. This summer, feelings are also running high. The authorities will want to try to ease tensions as quickly as possible. Nick Beake, BBC London News, Forest Gate.
A young woman and her cousin have been left with life-changing injuries after an acid attack in East London during a morning rush hour. They were in a car in Beckton when it happened. Sonia Jessup is here with more details. And Sonia, just worth mentioning at this point, if anyone has young children in the room, that some of the images we'll show could be upsetting.
That's right. Resham Khan had been celebrating her 21st birthday. She was sitting in the car at traffic lights with her cousin Jamil Mukhtar last Wednesday, 9 o'clock in the morning, and a man came up and threw acid through her window. He then went round to the other side of the car and threw acid over Jamil. Now, Resham has posted pictures of herself on Twitter before and after the attack, and she's written, "The pain was excruciating. I was struggling to close the window. My cousins struggled to get us away. I saw my clothes burn away in front of me." She described trying to flag down other drivers for help. She says it took around 45 minutes to stop someone and beg them to take them both to hospital.
Goodness, horrific injuries. Do we know why they were targeted?
No, that's not clear. It sounds as though she didn't know the man involved, although she does say he had a distinctive facial tattoo. What we do know is, though, that sadly these kind of attacks are on the rise in the capital. BBC London's discovered more than 450 people were victims last year. Acid is easy to come by. There are no penalties for carrying it. And we know, of course, it leaves victims with severe emotional and physical disfigurement. Resham has had 2 skin grafts. Jamil actually had to be placed in an induced coma for a time. Both suffered damage to their eyesight. A fundraising page has been set up to support them. And Resham's written on Twitter, "I'm devastated. I keep wondering if my life will ever be the same."
Goodness, horrific. Sonia, thanks very much. A fundraising campaign has raised £6 million for a new air ambulance in Essex and Hertfordshire. More than half the proceeds were raised by selling their own lottery cards. Richard Daniel took to the air with the crew.
Gleaming in its new red and yellow livery, today call sign Helimed 55, prepared for takeoff.
It's faster. It's slightly faster, 20 to 25 knots faster than our current helicopter. So that means when we're going to the outer reaches of our area, we can be there 6 to 7 minutes quicker, which obviously has an impact.
Fly 103, good fuel, power plant is clear and normal.
Pre-flight checks complete, it was up and away, skimming across the countryside to Highlands Park near Chelmsford. A chance to thank some of the thousands of people who raised the £6 million needed for the new aircraft.
Absolutely wonderful, it's breathtaking, and we can't thank, because we're volunteers, we can't thank the people of Essex and Hertfordshire enough for it.
Looking on, David Moon. In 2012, air ambulance paramedics saved his 15-month-old daughter Maisie after the family car was hit head-on by a lorry.
She wasn't breathing at the time. It's quite clear that she had at least one broken leg that I could see from getting in the back of the car with her. There was blood everywhere, and it's quite obvious that the air ambulance, if they had not been there, I wouldn't have a little girl today. It's quite simple as that.
The aircraft is not just more agile. For paramedics, it has one overriding advantage.
In the back, with myself and the doctor and quite often the trainee, it's going to be the space, an almost 360 access, what we hinge most of our treatment on, being able to access the patient. So we've reduced the amount of bags that we now have to carry by looking at the kit that we carry, condensing it.
The helicopter should last 10 years, operating alongside another that's leased.
We've got a laser beam on the front of this helicopter, which means we will be able to fly through the night. The aircraft is equipped for that, and when the charity is ready, our long-term goal is to be able to provide a 24/7 service.
Next month, with staff training complete, it goes into service, doing what it's designed to do, saving lives. Richard Daniel, BBC London News.
OK, next. Imagine being on holiday on the beach when you see a shark swimming in shallow waters near you. It happened in Mallorca on a beach near Magaluf at the weekend, sending bathers running out of the sea. It was later captured and believed to have a serious head wound. Well, one Londoner who was there and couldn't believe what he was seeing spoke to me a little earlier at his home in Mill Hill over Skype. I began by asking Tim Protty-Jones how he reacted.
I mean, it was unlike anything we'd seen before. I've never seen a shark before in person, only in the films, you know. And it's we go to Mallorca and we go to, you know, Palma and that sort of area every year if we can. To actually see a shark on this beach that we've been to so many times was incredible. We'd been there all morning, and my wife, it was about midday, I think, and she got up to go into the sea for the first time. She just got too hot. So she was heading into the sea, whilst most people seemed to be heading out, which I'd noticed, and sort of joked with her that because she was going in, everyone was leaving. So and then the next thing I saw was literally this fin, you know, swimming past in really, really shallow water, you know, right up to where the sand hit the water. And it was quite a sight. So I literally threw my phone to my wife, and she started taking a few photos, and I got up and joined her. Then soon everyone had got out of the water. You know, you had lifeguards saying for everyone to get out. Everyone on the beach had run to the front of the, you know, to the beach itself, to the front there, just to capture it all. You know, to take it all in. No one could really believe what was happening. So, but it was, you know, as far as sharks go, I didn't really know what to expect. But it was a beautiful, beautiful thing to see.
And how were other people reacting? Was there a sense of calm?
Do you know what? It was kind of eerie because there was a lot of movement, but actually there was no screaming or anything. So it was just a case of no one wanting, I guess, to alert the shark to, you know, to panic or anything. And likewise, nobody wanted to alert other people to get unnecessarily worked up. I guess the main sort of movement and activity was from families getting their children out of the water because the shark was in such shallow water, which is obviously where all the children play. So they were all carrying them out, and it was just like that, really. And then, but realistically, like once the shark had gone and it felt safe to do so, you know, people were back in the water, a bit tentatively, but people were back in there within about, you know, 20, 25 minutes. It was incredible.
OK, well, Tim, thank you so much for sharing that with us. You've got a great dinner party story there. Thank you so much. What a thing to see. Well, turning now to something that will appeal to your sense of smell. Scented installations at Somerset House are showcasing the perfume pioneers of this century. Of course, it's going to be difficult to convey the essence of this exhibition. Smell-o-vision hasn't been invented yet, but we've sent Wendy Hurrell to try.
Challenge accepted. Well, easy at first because you probably know these ones, but the rest of the exhibition is 10 mysterious modern perfumes, and it's left for you to describe what they smell of.
I think maybe my dad, but after he's been working in the allotments, amongst the herbs.
Just roadworks and stuff like that, tar, yeah.
Yes, individual noses will come up with wildly different interpretations.
It could be cloves. I'm not really sure. It's luxury, pure luxury.
It's making me think of orchards and maybe something kind of soapy as well.
Soapy orchards?
Indeed, yes.
Once you've had a good sniff, you can write down your thoughts on one of these cards and then compare them to the full story of each fragrance revealed later. But picking out the particular notes is harder than you might imagine.
I don't think I've got the nose like you're supposed to have.
Some throw you off the scent completely.
Kids' toys, it actually smells like plastic toys. My granny's house.
Well, actually, Dark Ride by a new bad boy on the perfumer block is more...
Notes of kind of a mildewy, you know, dirty chlorinated water with like the scent of pyrotechnics in the air from like, you know, and fog machines. So there's a bit of a smokiness to it.
An unconventional concoction, but odour connoisseurs are impressed by his creations, not to mention his attire. You've totally out-blinged me, haven't you?
I mean, that's always the goal. So I like to out-bling everybody.
At the end of the exhibition is the laboratory. This is where you can find out how perfumes are made. So here are the individual ingredients that go into a scent. And the ladies in lab coats there are perfumers, and they're explaining how you make a scent out of all of these ingredients. Perfume is personal. Not everything will be to your liking. But you can have a whiff at Somerset House until mid-September. Wendy Hurrell, BBC London News.
Some of their expressions. Well, will the weather be to our liking? Wendy has returned and can tell us. Hey, Wendy.
Hello, good evening. Well, yes, it depends what you like. If you liked the hot weather last week, great. It's not going to be like that this week, though. What we had today was a hint of things about to change. A lot of the Weather Watchers pictures were showing me these sort of mare's tails. That's what we used to call them in the olden days. Cirrus clouds that look like mare's tails, and it always spells a change to the weather, because for the rest of the week it is going to be cooler than today, and there will be spells of rain. Much needed, though, of course, across the gardens and parks of London. Here's what's happening. High pressure gone, and an absolute mess of low pressure, isobars, fronts and rain. Don't try and pick any detail out of this. It's just an indication of just how unsettled it's going to be as we go through the next few days. So if you can, make the most of the warm and sunny evening we have out there at the moment. Through the night, it's going to stay fairly warm. There will be some cloud that drifts up into London and the home counties, and perhaps 1 or 2 showers breaking out by dawn. 15 degrees overnight, though, so it is a pretty warm night. And you might just about get to work in the drier weather. There could be 1 or 2 showers around first thing, but keep a brolly with you, because as the day goes on, there's more likelihood of seeing that rain working its way in, interspersed with drier, perhaps even brighter spells. So we could get a bit higher than the 22 degrees you see here, but there may also be 1 or 2 quite heavy bursts of rain. And that continues into the evening and overnight into Wednesday as well. And again, there could be some heavy bursts. There might be a rumble of thunder as well. A really good watering for the garden, and another really muggy night. This is Wednesday's picture, the rain moving away from us, so it should leave us something drier and brighter for Wednesday afternoon, but a massive drop in temperature compared to last Wednesday, when, don't forget, it was 35 degrees. It'll be more like 19 this Wednesday. So through the end of the week, it's still rather unsettled. There could be 1 or 2 outbreaks of rain through Thursday, Friday, and then into the weekend it looks like it's going to start being a little more breezy as well. So the hot weather very much gone by now, Riz.
Gosh, what a difference a week makes. Wendy, thanks very much. Tonight's main news. After more than 2 weeks of talks, the Conservatives and the Democratic Unionist Party have reached a deal to give Theresa May a majority in Parliament. It'll mean an extra £1 billion for health, education and infrastructure in Northern Ireland. And 75 high-rise buildings have failed fire safety tests which have taken place since the fire at Grenfell Tower. The company, which manufactures the cladding thought to have been used on the tower, has withdrawn it from sale around the world. That's all from us for now. Plenty more, though, of course, on our website and our Facebook page, and I'll be back with our late news at 10:30, so hope you can join me then. From all of us on the team, thanks for watching, and do enjoy your evening. Bye-bye.